anywhere. Whether in business, in politics, in everything, we are very competent. What only happened was that imperialism, slavery, and the like affected not all, but most Africans in their own levels of confidence as human beings. We are therefore happy that organizers of the Door of Return chose Pan-African Parliament to reflect on the miseries and the pain caused by slave trade, and also to reflect on the lessons learned, but more importantly to ask the question. We are here today to remind ourselves of the question, where do we go from here? I know we'll talk nice things today, sometimes emotional, inspirational, but at the end, by the end of the day, we then say, where do we go from here? As Martin Luther King Jr. said. And the time of Africa is now. The time of Africa is now, and the time for African renaissance, as former President Thabo Mbeki and others said, that the time for Africa is now. We are grateful that you have come to Pan-African Parliament to forge cooperation with us as to raise the aspirations of the peoples of Africa as we rise from the ashes of slavery and colonialism. As we go ahead to fulfill the aspirations of the Agenda 2063, we invite you to partner with us to achieve Africa regeneration. Yes, as the late President Robert Mugabe would say, Africa is for Africans. If we join forces in unity, we can be a powerhouse to reckon with in the world. And for the good Lord has endowed our continent with many natural resources, which have been plundered over the years to enrich other continents. When we look in our history, we have evidence that Africa is endowed with intellectual capacity, and I've just mentioned a few personalities. The ruins of the African city of Carthage, the pyramids of Egypt, the sculptures of ancient Ghana, Benin, and Mali, the temples of Ethiopia, the rock paintings, the Great Zimbabwe, the Kalagadi in the Namib Desert, all speak of Africa's contribution to civilization. I'm therefore humbled to share a platform, and I want to repeat, I'm therefore humbled, and I believe you also are humbled to be in this chamber today to share and discuss, share views with the son of Dr. Marcus Garvey, Dr. Julius Garvey. Welcome home, Dr. Garvey and your team. Thank you for remembering the African Renaissance Project. I'm sure that your father, Dr. Marcus Garvey, would have been proud of this moment. We are convinced that the diaspora has a critical role to play in the development of the continent, of this continent, Africa. Admittedly, we cannot erase the 400 years of history, but through this cooperation, we can shape the future together. It is my hope that rather than going into mourning, we rejoice that we have found each other again and that the dream of a united, prosperous Africa is within our reach. As we meet here today, let us remember the hopes that Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Marcus Garvey had for the continent of Africa. Allow me to reiterate those hopes and aspirations which Marcus Garvey had. One, the main dream was to unify people of our color against imperialism all over the world. And that is to establish a universal fraternity among our race. Second is to promote the spirit of race pride and love. And to reclaim the fallen race. To promote a conscientious Christian worship among the native tribes of Africa. To establish universities, colleges, and secondary schools to further education and culture of the boys and girls of our race. And to conduct a worldwide commercial and industrial intercourse. So as we meet in this August House, let us salute and acknowledge the work done by our eminent Pan-Africanists. You all know W.E.B. Du Bois, a staunch advocate of African culture and history, who propounded the idea that colonialism lay at the heart of Africa's political and social problems. Marcus Garvey, a black nationalist, who urged the return of Africans to the continent, which he attempted to facilitate through the establishment of a shipping company, the Black Star Line, aimed at transporting black Africans back to Africa. This venture was unsuccessful due to obstruction by both the US and British authorities concerned with the future of their colonies. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Julius Nyerere of Kenya, Sekou Touré of Guinea, Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, among others. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's post-independent leader, categorically linked Ghana's independence to the continent's own, recognizing that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of the continent. President Kwame Nkrumah, so the organization of the OAU liberated Africa with very limited resources, but with unity of purpose. And I want to repeat that. The Organization of African Unity liberated Africa with very limited resources, but with unity of purpose. Let us continue to struggle by ensuring that no African child goes to bed, no African woman gives birth without medical assistance, that no African child is illiterate. Let us be proud to be Africans. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Vice President, for that inspiring speech. I will now call upon His Majesty, Honorable Aaron Mahumani. I don't see him, do we? Oh, he's here.
To the program director, to the vice president, to our senator and our esteemed and distinguished guests, let me say warmly greetings and welcome back home. My role as a royal leader, sometimes it's important perhaps just to briefly indicate who we are, because that defines who I am. If you are a royal leader, your key and main responsibility is to ensure the well-being of the people under you. And it is through birth from generation to generation. And our main role as well is to administer justice to our people alike without any fear and favor, and to ensure that there is socio-economic development, and also to promote, preserve culture and heritage. So to me, to have been invited to be part of this August, meeting, it is very, very paramount, and I'm not taking it for granted. And I want to thank the organizers and the leadership which is here for me to be part and parcel of this most important event. Thank you so much for the invitation. The Door of Return, in collaboration with Pan-African Parliament and NEPAD, are very key and very instrumental for us to be here today, and not forgetting the main drivers, the Door of Return, movement, who are with us here, coming from America and in the continent, just to visit us here in South Africa. This is highly appreciated and highly commended. This year, as we all know, marks 400 years since the first officially documented group of Africans were taken through the door of no return, and so has recognized Africa Diaspora as the sixth regional economic community, which is very, very important. And I want to mention that as you are here today, you are welcome back home. Welcome back home. I thought you will like it. You are welcome back home. "400 years ago, it was a door of no return, but today is a door of return. Where are you coming? You are coming back home, and I want to indicate how important is home. We all come from our countries. Let me speak not only in terms of South African context, but to say each and everyone's country, there is land, which is our land, and our land is our home. And our home is where we sweep and where we clean our yards. In our home is where we travel through it. We enjoy its varied climate, terrain, and vegetation. It is a diverse cultural and different kind of people who are actually sharing one common identity, to know that we're all home. So it is important as well to actually preserve ourselves as a generation, to discover that all the time in our life, home is the best. So as you are coming back in your home, we invite you to join us in this following manner. In all the continent, in the rural communities, what you will witness and see is abject poverty. What you will see is underdevelopment. What you will see is protracted distances for social amenities. What you will see is lack of infrastructure, and if there are infrastructure, they are very poor or dilapidated. So I'm inviting you as you are coming home, coming with what you have, your intellectual capacity, your resources. Let's join our minds, let's join our hands, let's work together and transform our society. It is very important to share our skills, to share our education. Dr. Mandela once said, education is a powerful weapon to transform the society. I'm inviting each and everyone, because it's a taboo in terms of an African culture, when one is rich while the other one is poor. It is a taboo, it is an African, if we don't really support and work together. So I'm inviting each and everyone, as we are welcoming you, to work together. The speakers spoke very well and said, you know, sometimes we as African people of this beautiful land and continent, which is endowed with mineral resources, with land for agricultural production, and with tourism, eco and cultural tourism, we are not exploiting them. We don't cherish who we are. We don't embrace ourselves. We admire other people. We admire other people's cultures and traditions and heritage, leaving ours. Who will actually cherish ours if we don't cherish ourselves? As people of the continent, I'm encouraging you to say, let's move away from the paradigm shift of thinking that anything which is Eurocentric is powerful and dynamic, and which is Afrocentric is a low class and low standard. I'm encouraging all of you, let's collaborate, let's cooperate, let's work together, let's have courage and work together. I'm inviting all of you. Perhaps you are here, what next now? Dr. Martin Luther Jr. said, what next? What is coming next? I'm inviting you. Where I'm coming from, I'm adjacent Kruger National Park, where there's wildlife. I've got a land for agricultural production. I'm inviting an investor. I'm inviting any intellectual capacity to come and join us. Let's start tomorrow. Time is now. Time for Africa is just now, not tomorrow. Let's work together to transform our society. The purpose of our living is to live a life of purpose. The purpose of life is to live a life of purpose. Let's act, because action activates activities. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You are all welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Majesty. I can feel the spirit of collaboration, cooperation, unity, love, and peace in this room. I'm going to call upon Dr. Reverend Dillon to introduce our keynote speaker, and thereafter our keynote speaker will come to the podium, and then we will then break a while for the group photograph. Dr. Reverend Dillon.
Thank you very much, Madam Director Chiwanda Mira. Let's put our hands together for Madam Lynn. To our Vice President, we salute you, sir. His Excellency Chief Fortune Chiram Bira, to His Majesty, we salute you, sir. And
to such an awesome group of Africans welcoming us back home. We thank you. Does the Americans feel the welcome? We appreciate the welcome back home. We are certainly energized, motivated, and ready. We take you up, Your Majesty, on the charge and the challenge in terms of where we go from here. I want to make the point that this cannot be an ordinary gathering, because Africans in Africa and Africans on the continent, we are not living with ordinary circumstances. And because our circumstances are not ordinary, our challenges are not ordinary, it means that this meeting cannot be an ordinary meeting. It is important that we leave here today with some solutions and some answers. We must leave with a way forward. We must leave truly with a commitment as to where we must go from here. I want to just acknowledge this group that journeyed from the United States of America, journeyed from parts of the Caribbean to be here today. We have journeyed through the door of what was no return in Ghana. We've journeyed to Goree Island only a couple days ago, and we've made a commitment that Ghana and Benin and Togo and Senegal and all these places along the western shores of Africa that we once viewed as doors of no return will no longer be doors of no return for the Africans in the Americas. We are saying, as we have transformed all the doors on every stop that we have made, that we have reversed the doors. We know that the colonial masters didn't want us to come back. They wanted us to leave Africa and then take Africa for themselves, but we've made a commitment that we are coming home to stay. Our physical presence might not always be here, but our spiritual presence will always be here. Our commitment will always be here. Our resources will always be here. Because after 400 years of enslavement in the Americas, more than 400 years in the Eastern Caribbean, more than 400 years in the Western Caribbean, and for Africans in America from 1619, when the first 20 or so Africans were taken as slaves and landed in Jamestown, Virginia, USA. We're saying 400 years later, it is time for Africans in the Americas to come on back home and help rebuild the continent. So here we are, despite all the challenges and the struggles. There are a group of dynamic men and women who have made the journey back with us. And I am going to give way for some of them to come and to share with us on this awesome day. But let this day be the beginning of something new. Your Excellency, I charge and challenge the Pan-African Parliament that this ought to be an annual experience. And let it not be an event, let it be we all leave here today with some things that can be translated to the African Union, so when they gather in January, they can ratify and put in place a new process that embraces the African diaspora as a true part of the African experience across this globe. Let me just quickly say that the reality is that Africans in the United States of America alone represent $1.75 trillion in spending power. Now that's a lot of spending power. If you were to take the entire country of Canada, Africans in America have more spending power than Canada. If you take the 20 smallest states in the United States of America, Africans in America have more power than the 20 smallest states in the United States of America. That's a lot of power, and that is the kind of power that must be harnessed now to ensure that together we are working to liberate and help Africa to rise to the fullness of her power. So we have with us today some dynamic men and women that will share with you, coming all the way from Barbados. We have the former Consul General to New York from Barbados. She comes representing the country of Barbados and the Caribbean, and that is in the person of Dr. Donna Hunt Cox. Let's put our hands together for her. We will hear from her a little bit later. We also have with us that will be sharing with us today another dynamic leader that represents us in New York State and has worked in the United States to bring justice and fairness to us. He heads the banking department for the for the state Senate in New York City, and that is Senator the Honorable James Saunders, and we will hear from him a little bit later as well. We also have with us one who's been a pioneer and a Pan-African leader. He has worked all across the continent of Africa for many years, have worked in the U.S., traveling to wherever black people are, seeking to bring power and strength to black people. He heads up the Institute for the Black World 21st Century. In addition to that, Dr. Ron Daniels is a former candidate for the President of the United States the presidency of the United States of America, and we're very happy that we also have Dr. Ron Daniels, who will be sharing with us a little bit later. We have also Dr. George Fraser, who is one of the leading business globe, to say it is time for us to truly understand that success runs in our race. By the way, he's the best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author for that very book, Success Runs in Our Race, and that is Dr. George Fraser. And finally, let me introduce and bring to the podium one who is truly a leader amongst us. He's done so much in the medical field. He's doing so much in carrying forth the legacy of his great father, one of the greatest Pan-African minds and leaders and pioneers, not just one who talked the talk, but one who walked the walk in the person of Marcus Messiah Garvey. Let's just salute Marcus Messiah Garvey. Come on, how many know Marcus Messiah Garvey? Salute him, because he's done so much. As our Vice President shared all the work that he has done, we've decided 100 or so years later that where Marcus Messiah Garvey left off, we will pick up. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pride that I present to you the very son of Marcus Messiah Garvey, and that is Dr. Julius Garvey. Let us receive him.
you very much for that magnificent introduction. Mr. Vice President and Madam Master of Ceremonies, honored guests, and the King. The King, I was very moved by your speech, and I'm not sure I have anything to add. Can we hear it again for the King? Because I think he laid it out for us. Well, it's good to be the King, but it's also good to be here with my people. It's wonderful to see all of you parliamentarians and to have this opportunity to dialogue with you, to meet you, and to say a few words in terms of the symbolism of the moment and for my delegation, and the symbolism of our being here as we commemorate 400 years since the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. As you know, Africa has been assaulted for thousands of years, actually, more than just 400 years, because the Arab assault started in the north of Africa and the east of Africa from certainly 700 in the current era. Before that, of course, Africa gave the world civilization. I want to go back that far because I've heard the Vice President say that we lack confidence in ourselves, and that's one of our problems. Well, 200,000 years ago, God sought to make man and woman in his own image. Where did he choose to do that? On the African continent. Who were the first men and women? Homo sapiens sapiens, Africans. So we have been around for 200,000 years. We built the first civilizations. We built the first everythings. So don't let anybody say, oh, you're the first so-and-so to do this and that within a European setting. No, we're the first. We're the first people. And we're the first of everything. And we're the first children of God. And we are made in the image of God. And what that means is that God equipped us to deal with all the problems that we would face here on planet Earth. So when we pray, don't pray to somebody outside ourselves. Pray to the God within ourselves. When we do that, we not only shall overcome, but we will overcome because we have that strength. I'd like you to know that we lost many things in the transatlantic slave trade. We lost our names, we lost our families, we lost our culture, we lost our history, but they could not break our spirit. The African spirit is alive and well. It has been alive and well. And that's how come we fought for our freedoms. There were continuous slave revolts, beginning here, of course, on the African continent. You did not submit to the enslavement of your people. You fought, and you fought the enslavers. And we fought, and we died, but we succeeded in terms of the abolition of slavery in 1834, 1838, 1868, in different parts of the West. But we fought for freedom. We fought to be free of the system that enslaved us. The structure that was created, that created slavery as a commercial enterprise, transformed itself into colonialism after the abolition of slavery, as I mentioned, in 1834 and 1838 in different places. But in 1884 and 1885, the former enslavers sat down in Berlin and divided up the African continent among themselves. They did not discuss it with Africans. They were not concerned with our thoughts. They were not concerned with our welfare. They were not concerned with our future. They were not concerned with our destiny. They were concerned with their greed. They were concerned with their avarice because they wanted to own our continent. They wanted to own us as a people in another form other than slavery, because slavery was no longer being tolerated as an idea. And so we had the period of colonialism. Again, we fought against that in so many wars. We fought against that. People such as W.B. Du Bois and a Trinidadian lawyer in 1900 began the concept of Pan-Africanism in the Americas. It's a concept that began there because those of us who had been transplanted always looked to Mother Africa. We always yearned for Mother Africa, to return to Mother Africa. Marcus Garvey picked up the baton, and certainly in the early part of the 20th century, he was the primary Pan-Africanist. You've heard some statements relative to that. He influenced many of the early leaders of Africa and African independence. Certainly there was the 1945 Manchester Conference, which was very seminal in transforming Pan-Africanism from, you would say, a Western diaspora concept to a truly African concept. People such as Nkrumah and such as Jomo Kenyatta were present at the Nnamdi Azikiwe from Nigeria, Hastings Banda from Malawi, etc. A number of others were at that conference. And as Kwame Nkrumah said, the book that fired his imagination more than any other book was The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. And this was compiled by my mother, his wife, while he was in jail in Atlanta. And so Kwame Nkrumah and others brought Pan-Africanism to the African continent. And Ghana was liberated in 1957, achieved independence. And I think you heard the statement that Kwame Nkrumah made, that the independence of Ghana means nothing until all the rest of Africa is free. And I like some of his sayings: Africa must unite, forward ever, backward never. This is truly Kwame Nkrumah. And we have to honor also that legacy as we congregate here today. Out of that came the Organization of African Unity in 1963. There were differences of opinions, and while people such as Kwame Nkrumah wanted the unity of Africa, a united Africa immediately, and contributed to the frontline states and the freedom of the rest of Africa, others who were experiencing nationalism got carried away with their own nationalism and wanted to go slow. Well, the pace has been slow, unfortunately. And we know that in 2002, we got the African Union, which has a stronger mandate than the OAU to carry forward with African unity. And it's been progress since then. And we now see more progress, I think, at a faster rate. We see that there's going to be an intra-African common market. It's been proposed and it's being worked on. It will take time, maybe until 2028 to come into fruition, where all the barriers will be broken in terms of customs and so on and so forth. And that will obviously open up tremendous economic possibilities in terms of trade. As it is now, intra-African trade is only about 10% of its trade, whereas in Europe, intra-European trade is 60%. So when Africa gets up to that level, certainly there'll be increased trade and commerce, and that will be, a way to increase wealth within the different countries. We see also in ECOWAS there's going to be a common currency. We see that the CFA countries are going to relocate their finances from France to benefit the Francophone countries. That again is a significant improvement. We are here from the diaspora. We are something like 300 million strong, and we want to unite with the 1.2 billion present here in Africa. Because when we look at Africa, we see an anomaly. We see the richest continent in the world. You have more than 60%, 70% of all the mineral resources, whether it's gold, diamonds, cadmium, platinum, et cetera, You have 70% or more of all the arable land to be cultivated for the agricultural and nutritional needs of the world. You indeed are the richest continent in the world. God has endowed you well. I think every day you should thank God. But then you need to ask God, why is it that Africa is also the poorest continent? The African people are the poorest people in the world. It's not by accident. I'm sure you know that. It's by design. But it's not by your design. It's by design of the same people that enslaved us, the same people that colonized us, and it's the same people that have given us globalization. After the Second World War, there was the Bretton Woods Conference, and again, the world was divided up, and certain institutions were created, like the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the IMF, and the United Nations. Now there are 54, I'm not sure, sometimes I hear 55 African countries that are represented at the United Nations, but what does that representation mean? Do we have a permanent seat in the Security Council? Do we have a veto? No. So we're just there in terms of numbers, but not there in terms of force. And it's the same thing economically. Somebody else sets the rules, the WTO, World Trade Organization, the IMF, and the World Bank. The World Bank gives you conditionalities, and you have to meet these conditionalities, and so on and so forth. So to what extent have we progressed in at least these last 400 and 500 years? We've been invaded, we've been enslaved, we've been colonized, and quite frankly, we're still colonized. We're here in South Africa. You paid a great price for your independence. People such as Steve Biko, I'm a great fan of Steve Biko and Black consciousness, Sobukwe. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in jail. Winnie Mandela is one of my heroines. There was a compromise made in 1994 when you received your independence and Mandela became president. How have the indigenous Africans benefited from your new nation? There are indications that you've gone backwards. That's not equitable. That's not what the fight was all about. Sharpeville, Soweto. That's not what it was all about. The sacrifice of so many young people. That's not what it was all about. There's a problem. Some of the problem is with leadership. Some of the problem is with the system that exists that wants to keep you under. It's the same system with a different face. You have to be aware of that. We are very, very much aware of that in the West, because we have fought and in many instances have been successful earlier on, So we've been able to study the system. And we know all of its parameters. We know that transforming the system is virtually impossible. We cannot take a moral high ground and say that yes, things were bad in the past, but they're going to improve because I met so-and-so, or so-and-so is now the Prime Minister of Britain, or Macron is in France, or some other kind leader has arisen in Europe, and they're going to somehow turn things around. Things are too good for them, they will not give it up. Power concedes nothing without power. Power resides in the people. You are a parliament of the people. Power resides in you and the people that you represent. We are part of NGOs and different economic and religious organizations that represent the people of the diaspora. We're here to dialogue with you. We're here to continue the bridges that have been built since your independence, with people such as George Padmore and others, Maya Angelou, who came and helped Kwame Nkrumah in the early days of Ghana's independence, and who have been here in South Africa in the early years also of your independence. And I think you know that your independence was helped by the diaspora, not only in the United States, but certainly many of us died here, those of us who came from Cuba and the Caribbean and fought in Angola and sent many of the apartheid warriors back in body bags. And that was what turned the tide in terms of apartheid in South Africa. So we must remember that, we must understand that, and we must understand that only through power can we change the situation. But we have to grasp power. Power is not going to be given to us from anything outside ourselves. We have the power. Spiritual power is the greatest power in the world, because that's what created the universe. We have that in us. Every day we can create something new, because we have the creative, God-given power of our humanity. We're made in the image of God. We've got the power. So it's time for a change. Let us dedicate ourselves today for that change. My father said, one God. There is only one God. So do not let religions separate us. We worship one God. Religions are just different ways of approaching the one God. That's all it is. You're coming down Main Street, you're coming down another street, but we're all ending up with one God. So do not let religions separate us. Understand that there are differences in religions, but there's only one God. My father said, one aim. The aim We have one. So it's one God, one aim, one destiny. And we do that, we end up with one love, where we love each other. And if we can love each other, then we can love the rest of the world. We can even love the people that have enslaved us. So I want you to repeat after me. One God, one aim, one destiny, one love. Thank you.
One destiny equals one love. That's why I paused. But you got it. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. For this, we shall adopt it as one of our mantras, is the Pan-African Parliament. So I will request all our visitors to walk outside. There's a place where we normally take group photographs, and then our distinguished speakers will then follow after our organized you for the group. We will now adjourn for now, and we'll come back immediately after the group photograph. Thank you very much for your attention. May we follow our photographers to a place outside for the group photograph. Thank you.
Dois. sure.
Or should I just do it standing?
Yeah, but I think
Maybe like on the red carpet, but then I must get the whole view. But also must not show. You know, the business. Or should I?
let me see. Yeah, let's go there and see.
Is that the good camera?
Any of the black XLRs.
Um, dois, três, quatro, cinco, seis, 100, 99, 98, 97, 96, 95, 5, 95, 95, 95, 94, 93, 92, 91, 90, 88, 89, desculpa, 89, 88, 87, 85, 84. Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 3.
Perfect. Thank you very much.